Today, I'm entering uncharted territory and building a box designed to warp wood into wild organic shapes. Yep, I guess you could say it's time to get things hot and steamy in the wood shop. Unfortunately, this fling might end in a breakup. Over the years, I've explored various methods for shaping lumber into different forms. That said, there's an avenue I've yet to take, and that's steam bending. You see, when you add heat and moisture to hardwood, it allows you to warp and bend thick stock into pretty interesting shapes. And I have a few builds coming up that are going to benefit significantly from that unique characteristic. So today I'm building a steam box, basically a low-tech sauna for stubborn wood. The goal, to take half-inch thick hardwood and convince it to do yoga. Now, I could have bought one of those fancy plug-and-play systems, but where's the fun in all that? Instead, I'm piecing together a plywood setup that fits my shop aesthetic, my needs, and my questionable decision-making habits. In this video, I'll walk you through the entire process from building the box, setting up the steam source, dialing in the temps, to finally testing it out with some real-world curves. Spoiler though, things might crack up, and I'm not just talking about the wood. So the first step in this box building bonanza is to cut down my sheet goods to their final dimension. Now, normally when working with cabinetry, or hardwood for that matter, I leave a lot of my parts oversized so that I can cut them down to their final dimension later on. But with a project like this one, I'm going for the final sizes right off the saw. That is with the exception of the end caps, but I'll talk more about that shortly. Oh, and before I get too far ahead of myself, if you guys want plans for this project, just let me know down in the comments, and as always, if there's enough interest, I'll put them together. Once I have all my parts trimmed down and squared up at the table saw, I'll take my work pieces over to the bench and give the box interiors a quick sanding. Now, this isn't super crucial since you're never actually going to see any of the interiors, but I'm a sucker for smooth surfaces. That said, I do believe that this is going to make the condensation flow with less resistance to my drain tube. And with that in mind, I decided to take that a step further and apply epoxy to the interior of my box. I don't know that this is actually going to do much, but I do think that sealing the interior will help protect the plywood from moisture penetration a little bit better than not doing so. It's also good to remember that this box is a tool and not a showcase piece. So while I want it to look good for the foreseeable future, I also understand that it's going to experience a ton of stress and wear in its use, so anything I can do to reduce that stress is a positive. I left the epoxy to cure overnight, and the next day I could return to the shop and align my two panels using some blue painter's tape. This step is actually pretty important because I'm going to be using dowels to lift my work pieces off the bottom of the steam box. So if my board's unaligned here, my supports are going to reflect that. Once I have a sufficient amount of blue tape applied to the mirrored sides, I can lay out the placement for my dowels. Now, I want the dowels to sit about an inch off the bottom of the box and be spaced out every 5 inches or so. This should give me plenty of leeway for any size stock that I want to put inside the steam box. I should also point out that this box is designed to hold workpieces up to 60 inches in length, so the overall dimension is just slightly over that. And the box is designed a bit wider than it is tall so that I can fit more parts in at one time. From there, I'll bring my plywood sandwiches over to the drill press and pop into through holes. I decided to go with 3/8 inch dowels for this project, so here I'm just popping in some 3/8 inch holes. Now, if you don't own a drill press, you could probably get away with doing this by hand. You just want to make sure that you use some sort of reference to hold your drill vertical while you drive in the holes. And that can be anything from just a square sitting on the surface to one of those fancy drill guides. Unintentional bird there. My bad. So the next step in the process is to lay out all the screw locations for my box. And to do that, I'm just going to lay out all the holes on one edge, then extend those lines across both my boards using a large square. This will ensure that all my screws align around the box. Once I have my spacing laid out, I can use a double square to mark the space between the edge of my stock and the center of my plywood, and then use some clamping squares to help me assemble the box. So, while I get things squared up and aligned there, let me take a quick second to say that if you guys are enjoying this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe. It really helps the video out, and I greatly appreciate your support. Once I have my board situated correctly and locked in place, I'll use a countersink bit to drive my pilot holes in, then secure things in place with some spack screws. Now, normally I would use glue in this situation, but since the heat and steam are going to expand these joints, it's not really necessary, and there's some foreshadowing there. So once I have the bottom panel attached, I can just repeat those same steps for the top panel. The biggest thing to watch out for here is that your panels are aligned for the entirety of the joint. You don't want those panels to only align at the ends and then have a bunch of dips in the middle. Though that does sound like the trend with most TV series. Talking to you, Lost. So once I've squared off one end, I'll just rotate the box and square up any remaining parts. And pro tip, you can use this same trick to cut through stock that's thicker than the depth of cut on your track saw. Just cut one edge, then rotate your workpiece and cut it from the other side. Easy peasy. From there, I can go ahead and mark out the length for my dowels. I want them to hang over a bit, but not so much that I have excess waste. With the rough dimension in hand, I can head over to the bandsaw to trim them down. And since we're here, here's a quick bandsaw thought. Give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, and he'll waste hundreds of dollars on equipment he'll only use a few times a year. Sorry, not sorry. So, with my pieces trimmed down, next it's time to thread the needle with my 3/8" dowels. To do that, I'll just hold my dowel vertically and give it the old tappy tappy. When I got close to the end, I made sure my dowels were aligned before plunging all the way through. And I did add a bit of wood glue to the ends of the dowels just to secure them in place. With the strategy mapped out, I just did my best Woody the Woodpecker impression to tap them all home. So while the glue cured, I went ahead and secured on the end cap. And that just means more pre-drilling and driving in the screws. Now, I'm not going to lie, I probably used too many fasteners here, but with heat and pressure, even diamonds crack. And so do shop projects. But either way,
it's so hot in here, it's like a steam box.
Yeah, so unfortunately I completed this project in the middle of a heat wave, so the shop AC just really wasn't able to keep up. Which makes me curious about how warm your shops are in the summer. If your shop's hot and steamy like mine, comment hot and steamy. But if you have a good climate controlled shop, start your comment with cool and calm. And as always, if you start your comment with hot and steamy or cool and calm, I'll reply to you first because I know you're paying attention. So once I flushed up all the dowels with my pole saw, I went ahead and hit them all with a random orbit sander just to even things out. Next, I could pop a chamfer bit in my palm router and break all the edges around the box. This isn't completely necessary, but I hate having sharp edges around the shop. And since we're already overdoing things, I may as well go ahead and hand sand those chamfers too. Yep, when things get hot and steamy, you never can be too careful. Now that my box is fully assembled, I can get my dimensions for my internal parts. And my internal parts here were really just going to be my door insert. When I designed the steam box, I wanted to create a door that had a plug insert on the interior. Something that would just take the brunt of the internal conditions. So this should prevent the door from warping as much, plus I think it'll help hold more of the steam in and create a better seal at the door. Once I had my 1/2" thick piece trimmed out at the table saw, I could use a couple scraps of 3/4 inch to align it to the center of the door. Then from there I can use some 23 gauge pen nails to lock it in place. And just as a side note, yes I did seal this earlier with the epoxy pieces, I just kind of forgot to mention it. My bad. With my plug in place, I could next add a few pieces of weather stripping to seal the edges of my door. And though this might be minor, it's important to do this step now for order of operations. I don't want to attach my door with my hinges, then attach the weather stripping, because the weather stripping is going to offset my door by about 1/16 of an inch. Once I've added a few pipe clamps to hold the door in place and apply a little pressure to the weather stripping, I can go ahead and attach the hinges. Next, I can attach my box clasp. Now, originally I planned to do a heavy-duty clasp here, but the clasp I ordered just didn't fit on the project. So I just went with the traditional jewelry box clasp to hold the door closed. Yep, you can call that an open and shut case. Oof. Next, I needed to pop my rear plug back off so I could plunge 2 holes for my steam tube and drain tubes. Now, I did try to keep these 2 holes as separated as I could to prevent flashing from the steam coming in. So once I marked out their location, I could take my workpiece over to the drill press to plunge into 1/2" holes. From there I could thread in my hose attachment fitting and then reattach the plug to the rear of the box. So while I finish that up, let me take a brief moment to say thank you to you guys for watching and supporting the channel. As many of you know, I design, build, and film these projects on nights and weekends, so having the support from you guys means the world. That said, if you'd like to support the show further, I'd like to invite you to join my Patreon. There you'll get discount codes for plans and merchandise, an invite to the Discord server, plus a whole lot more access you just can't get through YouTube alone. So if that sounds like something that would interest you, check out the link in the description. And to those of you who've already joined, thank you guys so much for your continued support. Your donations go directly towards making these videos. So thank you. So the last steps in the construction process were to drive in 2 more holes. One for the thermometer so I can monitor temperatures inside the box, and the second for a steam release. You see, if you don't add the steam release, then all the pressure builds up inside of the box, and it doesn't allow the steam to actually penetrate the wood as well. This is one of those small features that I see a lot of people skip, but it's a super important one. Now, before I actually fire up the steam box, I'm going to wrap it in a moving blanket to help it retain heat and trap any moisture that might escape through the joints. I also propped up the front with some scrap wood to tilt the box backwards. This way any condensation flows towards the rear and out the drain tube. After letting the steamer do its job for about 15 minutes, my box had reached 212 degrees, which meant it was time to insert my 1/2-inch test strips. For this first test, I'm going to try out some maple, some walnut, and some cherry. I know that each species and even the grain orientation affects how easily the wood can be manipulated, so I wanted to have a variety to experiment with. With my parts in the box, I could take a 45-minute lunch and let the steam do the heavy lifting. So my first attempts at bending the 1/2-inch stock weren't exactly a success, but they were definitely good learning experiences. I noticed that the failure points in my pieces lined up with areas that had some pretty dramatic cathedrals in the grain. And I do know straight grain is ideal for steam bending, but this was just a test run. I also realized my form had a pretty tight curve, which made things tougher without a backing strap. You see, the form I'm using here is actually from a previous project, and that project was for a bent lamination piece where the stock is much thinner and it was much easier to manipulate. After a couple failed rounds, I let the sticks hang out in the sauna for an additional 20 minutes, then went for round 3. This time I didn't try to work the piece all the way around the form, and instead only tried for half. And thankfully, that was a success. My maple bent about as easily as a paper straw in a milkshake. Come on, guys. I left my workpiece to dry overnight, and when I came back the next day, popped it out of the clamps and it held its form perfectly. I've still got some testing to do, but I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. The only real change I'm making going forward is adding a couple steel straps around the outside of the steam box to help keep the walls from flexing. I noticed some expansion on the box sides almost immediately, so these straps should help keep everything in check. But hey, now that the steam box is in working order, I've got some pretty cool projects planned for it. So if you want to check those out, make sure you subscribe. And if you want to go on another adventure like this, check this one out next. As always, I knew this would work, and I'll see you next time.